After disabling the economy for 2 years and spending more than $500 billion to save approximately 70 lives, the Canadian government needs your help. For a one-time donation of, well, any amount really, you can transfer all of your financial assets to fund Justin Trudeau's next costume party, the only one you can attend without a mask.
Are you breaking the spirit, if not the letter of the law, to hold a party event?
The big decisions about our future, they're being made now.
I'm not sure that was an answer to my question. So did you get special clearance to hold an event?
We're going to continue to do everything we can to keep people safe.
Last week, Justin Trudeau decided to take a break from partying maskless and tracking the whereabouts of his citizens using his vaccine passports in order to inform the public that
The federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act.
The Emergency Measures Act allows the government to override the rights and freedoms of any of its citizens. So Trudeau had to justify why he invoked this act for the first time in Canadian history.
We are reinforcing the principles, values, and institutions that keep all Canadians free.
That's right. The Freedom Convoy driving to Ottawa is a complete and utter violation of your freedom. Sure, True and Trudy could have simply tried explaining to the truckers why they need to get vaccinated, but then he wouldn't have had 2 weeks vacation time to sit at home and watch the Olympics. Witnessing the protests growing in his absence, Trudeau decided to double down on his strategy of condemning his adversaries by calling them racists.
What are we going to do with these people?
Misogynists.
He name calls people that he disagrees with.
And adding one new slur to the mix.
Conservative Party members can stand with people who wave swastikas.
I am a strong Jewish woman and a member of this House and a descendant of Holocaust survivors, and I have never it's never been singled out, and I have never been made to feel less, except for today when the Prime Minister accused me of standing with swastikas.
When this Jewish Nazi informed Trudeau that forcing people to show their papers to leave their homes and seizing the financial assets of their political adversaries is the primary component of the fascist playbook, Trudeau pulled his signature move, dipping out of office and launching a rebranding campaign.
The RCMP arrested a small group of people within the larger blockade and seized firearms, ammunition, and body armor. It is believed that this group was willing to use force against police officers.
If you thought of terrorists as, the type of people who fly planes into buildings or blow up city buses instead of people who drive trucks down roads and blow up inflatable castles, then you probably haven't been keeping up to date with the new Dictator's Dictionary.
We are broadening the scope of Canada's anti-money laundering and terrorist financing rules so that they cover crowdfunding platforms and the payment service providers they use.
With her revision to the term terrorism, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland set 2 historical precedents that are worthy of celebrating. First, she proved that there is no glass ceiling for despotism, and second, she became the politician with the most ironic name. When Freeland and Freedom saw that taking fuel wasn't letting the trucks drive out of the city, they must have watched my previous video to learn that they can invoke the Emergency Measures Act to force the trucks out at gunpoint.
We're not using the Emergencies Act to call in the military. We're not suspending fundamental rights or overriding the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We are not limiting people's freedom of speech. We are not limiting freedom of peaceful assembly. We are not preventing people from exercising their right to protest legally. This is about keeping Canadians safe, protecting people's jobs, and restoring confidence in our institutions.
The police were well aware that some citizen journalists may try documenting their acts of heroism, so in order to stay on point with Justin Trudeau's mission to defund the police, they had to make filming illegal.
If we see you again, it'll be different. Leave. I tell you. Take your camera and get out of here. Do you understand that?
If you're wondering why Trudeau and his government openly support protests in other countries while condemning those in his own,
I would be remiss if I didn't start also by recognizing the news coming out of India about the protests by farmers. Let me remind you, Canada will always be there to defend the right of peaceful protest. We believe in the importance of dialogue, and that's why we've reached out through multiple means directly to the Indian authorities to highlight our concerns.
You have to remember that during the Indian farmers' protest, the Indian government actually made the grave error of communicating with the protesters and using the court system to resolve the dispute. Something that Trudeau and Trudy could never stand for.
Here in our capital city, families and small businesses have been enduring illegal obstruction of their neighborhoods, occupying streets, harassing people, breaking the law. This is not a peaceful protest.
Well, at least now that those dreadful weeks of peace and celebration are over, the protest is finally violent enough to meet Trudeau's requirements for attendance.
I have attended protests and rallies in the past when I agreed with the goals, when I supported the people expressing their concerns and their issues. Black Lives Matter is an excellent example of that.
But forced evacuation wasn't the only action that Trudeau took with his new unlimited power.
As of today, a bank or other financial service provider will be able to immediately freeze or suspend an account without a court order.
The government retroactively making your past actions now illegal in order to seize your financial assets may sound like a scary precedent. But how else is Trudeau's government going to recover the $500 billion they spent reducing COVID death rates by 0.2%?
I've asked our city manager, for instance, how can we take possession of all of those trucks that have been towed away? How can we confiscate those and sell those trucks to help pay for some of our costs?
Plus, the next time Trudeau accuses his opposition of
Steal food from the homeless,
he'll actually be right, considering that the soup kitchen is the only place they can afford to eat. Trudeau initially invoked the Emergency Act for 30 days, but after seeing how long he could lock down a country with 2 weeks to
flatten the curve,
he decided that his vassals would happily accept an extension to his unlimited rule. But 2 weeks to flatten the curve only lasted 2 years, which is nowhere near long enough for a man who openly brags about his admiration for modern dictatorships.
There's a level of admiration I actually have for China, because their basic dictatorship is allowing them to actually turn their economy around on a dime.
Yesterday, Trudeau announced to a concerned public that he will be revoking the Emergency Measures Act, while his deputy is working on making these powers permanent.
We used all the tools that we had. Now, some of those tools, we will be putting forward measures to put those tools permanently in place.
The only obstacle remaining to Trudeau's acquisition of absolute power is the parliamentary system, which would have to vote on whether or not the Emergencies Act was justified.
I can't imagine that anyone who votes no tonight is doing anything other than indicating that they don't trust the government. But like I said, I am confident that the majority of parliamentarians will stand up to support our values, to stand up to support our democracy.
Fortunately for Trudeau, his government-funded Brainstream media was able to convince the public that this logic actually makes sense. Voting to give the Prime Minister authoritarian rule over the country is a vote for freedom and democracy.
A man who wore blackface more times than he can remember, took a terrorist with him to a trip on India, gave Omar Khadr $10 million. We're not going to stop talking to our constituents just because the Prime Minister disagrees with them.